The date is August 17, 1942. The location is Tenaru River, Guadalcanal. The time is just past midnight. The air is thick, humid, and heavy with the scent of spent gunpowder and swamp rot. Here, in the dense, lightless jungle, the modern industrial war machine was colliding head-on with an ancient, deeply held warrior ethos. The Japanese Imperial Army, masters of the bunker, the night infiltration, and the bayonet charge, believed they held a monopoly on psychological terror in this new Pacific hell. They were wrong. They had not yet faced the terrible mechanical logic of American mass production, distilled into a single terrifying sound. This night, a Japanese regiment, believing they were facing only a thin screening force, launched a ferocious banzai charge against the perimeter held by the U.S. 1st Marine Division. It was a charge born of absolute discipline and contempt for death, a doctrine that valued the human spirit over the material. The Marines dug in behind barbed wire and mounds of coral, waited. Their standard armament was the magnificent M1 Garand, a superb rifle with its 8-round clip. But among them were a few men holding something different, heavy, oil-stained weapons with an archaic, almost gangster-like profile. These were the M1928A1 Thompson submachine guns, or the Tommy guns, fitted with their notorious bulky 50-round drum magazines. The sound of the charge began as a rising tide of shouts, bayonet scrapes, and frantic footfalls. Then, the American line erupted with the rhythmic thwack ping of the Garands. But suddenly a new noise cut through the chaos, a sound unlike any weapon on Earth, a high-pitched, terrifying mechanical snarl. Brrrrap! A single sustained burst of .45 caliber fury. What the Japanese did not yet understand was the sheer tactical difference this weapon represented. Their own standard Type 100 submachine gun fired a slow 450 rounds per minute and was seen as a secondary weapon. The Thompson, firing nearly 700 rounds per minute from that single large drum, was a point-blank industrial shredder. One Marine, Private First Class John Bassaloni, watched as a group of 10 Japanese soldiers converged on a single machine gun nest. Their charge was immaculate, a study in determined aggression. Bassaloni didn't have time to reload his M1. He grabbed his Thompson. He aimed for the center mass of the charging group and held the trigger. In a span of less than 5 seconds, the drum magazine was empty. 50 rounds of heavy .45 ACP ammunition had torn into the attackers. The Marines watching were stunned. The charging line simply ceased to exist. They hadn't ducked, or scattered, or retreated. They had been systematically cut down by a dense wall of lead. The Marine on the machine gun nest later wrote, "It wasn't a fight. It was a demolition. It was like watching someone take a hose to a sandcastle." This was the core irony of the Pacific War that would define the next 3 years. The Imperial Japanese Army, having mastered the art of the hidden foxhole and the impregnable bunker, was about to meet the American manufacturing doctrine that could dump an unsustainable amount of lead downrange faster than any soldier could reload. The Thompson was awkward, heavy, and expensive, but in the close, dark, terrifying confines of the jungle, its drum was a death warrant. It was about to transform the battlefield from a contest of skill into a ruthless exchange of volume. It is this transformation, the shift from precision to saturation, that this documentary will explore. The drum magazine was not just an ammunition feed. It was the ultimate tool for delivering shock and awe at the closest possible range, marking the moment when the Japanese soldiers' bravery met the American machine's terrifying, unstoppable production. If you are interested in exploring the incredible technological and human stories behind World War II weaponry, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell for more historical deep dives. The Thompson submachine gun, known as the Tommy gun, began its life not as a weapon of war, but as a technological experiment and an industrial failure. Its creator, Brigadier General John T. Thompson, had envisioned a trench broom to solve the static deadlock of World War I. He wanted a lightweight machine gun, firing pistol ammunition, that could sweep German trenches clean. The war ended before his design, finalized in the early 1920s, could see action. The original M1921 model was a masterpiece of pre-war machining. Brass compensators, blued steel, a finely crafted wood stock, and a price tag of over $200 per unit. By 1939, this was an astronomical cost for a small arm, making it a favorite only of police forces, bank robbers, and Hollywood. It gained a terrible reputation in the hands of gangsters like Al Capone, a fact that would ironically lend it an aura of raw, uncivilized lethality when it finally reached the Pacific. The original design, however, had one feature that was both its greatest strength and greatest weakness: the 50-round drum magazine known as the L-drum. This magazine was a complex piece of clockwork, heavy, difficult to load, and prone to jamming if not maintained perfectly. It weighed over 4 pounds when fully loaded, shifting the center of gravity of the already hefty 10-pound weapon. Why, then, was the drum deemed essential for the brutal island-hopping campaign? Because of the Japanese doctrine of the suicide charge and the strength of their pillboxes. The Imperial Japanese Army infantry was trained to endure, to hold their fire until the last possible moment, then unleash a concentrated barrage, often followed by a relentless charge designed to shatter the enemy's nerve. To stop this charge, a machine gunner needed sustained fire. But standard belt-fed machine guns were too heavy for the point man in the jungle to carry. The rifleman, armed with the 8-round M1 Garand, faced a critical vulnerability: the 7-second interval required for a reload. In the terrifying intimacy of jungle warfare, 7 seconds was an eternity, enough time for 5 or 6 determined Japanese soldiers to cover 50 yards and engage in close combat. The Thompson, with the L-drum, solved this. A squad point man could carry the weight, and often did, because he knew the drum gave him an unparalleled volume of fire for up to 2 seconds straight. This was enough time to completely saturate a bunker opening or annihilate a charging squad before the weapon clicked empty. The transformation from the elegant M1921 to the military-grade M1928A1, and later the streamlined M1 and M1A1, was a masterclass in industrial simplification driven by necessity. The elegant, complex Blish lock was abandoned. The cut's compensator was often removed. The wooden foregrip was replaced by a plain horizontal one. The goal to make it faster, cheaper, and easier to produce. By 1943, the cost had dropped significantly, and production soared. One marine engineer famously said, "We took a Cadillac and turned it into a Jeep. It lost its finish, but it gained its teeth." Crucially, the Japanese perspective on the Thompson began to change as early as Guadalcanal. Initially, their intelligence reports dismissed it as a crude American weapon of law enforcement, too inaccurate for real combat. They focused their counter-tactics on the Garand. But then came the survivors of the night attacks. One captured Japanese diary entry, later translated, speaks volumes about the psychological shift. They do not fire and wait. They hold the little machine gun. When we approach, it is not a rifle shot. It is a terrible, continuous tearing sound. And then, there is no one left to charge. It does not allow for honor. It is a demon sound. The accuracy didn't matter in the jungle. The speed did. The sheer psychological terror of that sustained brrr AP from the drum, the knowledge that a single Marine could dump 50 rounds into a confined space before they could even draw a breath, began to erode the unbreakable confidence of the Japanese infantry. The Thompson was transforming from a mobster's tool into the U.S. Marine Corps' close-quarters executioner. The jungle warfare of the Pacific was a nightmare of infiltration, close-quarters shock, and subterranean defense. The Japanese had perfected the art of the spider hole and the interlocking pillbox network, designed to make every step forward a costly, terrifying gamble for the Marines. Their defenses were built not just of wood and earth, but of coral, concrete, and rock, capable of absorbing multiple hits from standard rifle fire. The key to defeating them was not necessarily penetration, but saturation, finding the embrasure, the small window or opening, and delivering a paralyzing, sustained blast of fire to suppress the occupants while a flamethrower team or demolitions expert moved in. This is where the drum magazine truly became indispensable. Consider the tactical problem. A Marine squad encounters a pillbox. It is firing an accurate, disciplined stream of fire. The only way to stop it, traditionally, was to lay down heavy fire from a Bar Browning automatic rifle or a light machine gun, both of which were cumbersome and required a crew. The Bar's 20-round magazine was also notoriously fast to empty. The Thompson gunner, Often the squad leader or the man immediately behind the point became the decisive factor. He could pop up, brace the heavy weapon on a tree root or hip, and unleash an aimed burst of 2 to 3 seconds, emptying 20 to 30 rounds into the embrasure. The rate of fire was so dense that the incoming rounds were almost overlapping. A Marine Sergeant, Elias Easy Johnson, veteran of Tarawa and Saipan, described the effect. You didn't need to be accurate, you needed to be fast. That drum gave you the confidence to just light up a bunker hole and hold the trigger. The sound alone made them duck. We found that the 45 round, even if it didn't pierce the concrete, its muzzle velocity was so low that it didn't over-penetrate inside the pillbox. It would hit a helmet or a wall and then fragment, filling the space with bouncing high-energy lead. The Japanese counter-perspective revealed in interviews after the war with surviving engineers highlights the tactical shock. Their defenses relied on the inherent delay in enemy fire, the pause required for reloading a rifle or a light machine gun. They would wait for the ping of a Garand emptying or the clack of a bar reload before popping up to fire. The Thompson drum eliminated this window of vulnerability. A former Japanese captain, Ikiro Matsuda, who survived the fighting on Biak, recounted the first time his squad encountered the sustained fire of the Tommy gun. We had dug a tunnel connecting 3 fighting positions. We were told to expect 8 rounds. The first Marine was upon us with the short rifle Thompson. It did not stop. It kept firing, a continuous stream, and the noise was deafening inside the small bunker. I thought their entire company was firing machine guns at us. My sergeant was hit, and he had his rifle pointed at the embrasure, but he did not have time to shoot. We were suppressed, completely pinned, and we waited for the reload that never came. The shock was twofold: tactical, the ability to sustain fire and deny the enemy their firing window, and psychological, the raw, continuous sound of the gun. The Thompson became more than a weapon. It became a symbol of American industrial might overwhelming individual resistance. It proved that sometimes, in the right environment, the sheer weight of fire, the quantity of lead delivered, is more important than the individual quality of the soldier wielding it. It made the heroic, individual Japanese defense a statistical impossibility. The raw, chaotic power delivered by the M1928A1 Thompson, with its L-drum on Guadalcanal, was a tactical epiphany, but it was also a logistical and manufacturing paradox. The sheer necessity of total war demanded a revolution in production that the handcrafted elegance of the original Tommy gun could simply not sustain. The complex machining, the meticulous fitting of components, and the sheer cost were industrial luxuries that needed to be ruthlessly purged. This critical juncture forced the American military and its contractors, primarily Auto Ordnance and Savage Arms, to make a defining choice: sacrifice minor reliability for exponential scale. The resulting weapon was the M1 Thompson. The simplification was dramatic. Out went the complex Blish lock, replaced by a simple blowback system. Gone were the delicate radial cuts for the drum magazine receiver. The M1 was designed to accept only the far simpler, more reliable and critically cheaper 20 or 30 round box magazines. The iconic drum, the symbol of its early, terrifying power, was systematically phased out. It was a calculated sacrifice, a recognition that the logistics of mass production were now more important than the tactical superiority of a single 50-round burst. The new M1 was functionally identical in its killing power. It still fired the devastating 45 ACP round at a high cyclical rate, but it was designed for the assembly line, not the armory bench. The time required to manufacture a single unit plummeted, and the cost was reduced by approximately 70% from its pre-war peak. This industrial pivot was the hidden engine of victory in the Pacific. By 1944, the production numbers ceased to be statistics and became statements of strategic intent. American factories were now churning out over 100,000 Thompson submachine guns annually, ensuring that this specialized weapon was no longer reserved for squad leaders, but could be issued to machine gun crews, forward observers, and even combat engineers. This level of output meant that the terrifying volume of fire once delivered by a handful of drums could now be replicated by a dozen box magazines across an entire company. It was the transformation of a rare shock weapon into a pervasive standard operating procedure. The contrast with the Imperial Japanese Army's capabilities could not have been starker. Their Type 100 submachine gun, while a respectable design, was produced in tragically small batches, fewer than 25,000 over the entire war. Furthermore, its 80mm Nambu round was far less potent than the Thompson's heavy .45 caliber bullet, lacking the necessary knockdown power for close-quarters jungle and bunker fighting. The Japanese simply could not meet the volume of fire required for modern infantry combat. This industrial mismatch had a direct, devastating impact on the American infantrymen who wielded the Thompson. Corporal Dale Peterson's account resonates with the psychological paradox of the high firepower weapon. The Thompson granted its user a temporary, absolute control over the immediate battle space. When a banzai charge began, the man with the Thompson was the designated stopper, the last line of defense, capable of delivering a sustained, metallic judgment. When you carry the Thompson, you are the bullseye. The Japanese learned fast that the source of that terrifying sound was the most important target. Your hands would shake, not just from the recoil, but from the adrenaline. You were basically carrying a personal machine gun, and that power, that responsibility, it was overwhelming. The Thompson was heavy, often weighing close to 11 pounds loaded, and the potent .45 ACP generated significant muzzle climb and recoil, making it unwieldy. The human cost was paid not only in becoming a priority target, but also in sheer physical exhaustion. Marine veterans frequently recounted the sheer labor of carrying the weapon and the hundreds of rounds of ammunition required to feed it across difficult terrain. This brings us to the logistics chain, the true unsung hero of the American war effort. The Thompson was an ammunition hog. A single Marine squad, engaging in an intense night action, could easily expend thousands of rounds of .45 ACP, a cartridge that was also demanded by countless pistols. This massive consumption meant that every mile gained in the Pacific had to be bridged by ships, landing craft and platoons of exhausted porters, ensuring that the endless appetite of the American automatic weapons was sated. The M1 Thompson, more than any other infantry weapon, symbolized the logistical commitment required to overcome the determined, fanatical defense of the Japanese. The resulting psychological impact on the Japanese command was profound. Their official post-mortem reports detailed the enemy's use of high-rate sustained automatic fire as the decisive factor. They had based their defense on the valor of the soldier and the strength of the emplacement, but they were defeated by a torrent of metal they could not dodge, suppress, or match. They believed in the superiority of the spirit. The relentless, churning production line of the Thompson proved the inescapable superiority of the lead. The manufacturing tyranny had rendered the warrior ethos obsolete. The war machine, always seeking efficiency and economy, eventually outgrows its own legends. As the conflict matured into the highly mechanized close-quarters slugfest of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, the Thompson, despite its legendary status and proven lethality, began its slow, inevitable transition to history. It was simply too expensive, too heavy, and still too complex for the final stages of total mobilization. The answer lay in the M3 grease gun, an ugly utilitarian submachine gun stamped entirely from sheet metal. It fired the same heavy .45 ACP round, but cost a mere $20 to produce, a staggering contrast to the Thompson's late war cost of around $70 per unit. The M3 was a pure expression of industrial design focused on function and mass production. Its adoption signaled the end of the Thompson's reign, yet paradoxically secured its legacy. The Thompson's greatest contribution was not the weapon itself, but the doctrine of shock firepower it pioneered. The core lesson it instilled in Marine Corps small unit tactics was simple: close quarters, combat demands, sustained, immediate suppression. Whether delivered by the Thompson's box magazine or the M3's simplified mechanism, the requirement remained absolute. In the final, Savage Island battles, the claustrophobic cave-clearing operations on Okinawa, the desperate night infiltrations, the Thompson's reputation as the ultimate morale killer and bunker buster was undeniable. It gave the American infantrymen the capability to instantaneously overwhelm fortified positions, a decisive edge in the most critical, life-or-death situations. The Japanese High Command's initial shock, the disbelief that a single man could deliver an entire machine gun's worth of ammunition in seconds, matured into a terrible strategic realization. They could not win the war of materials. The terrifying silhouette of the Thompson and the distinctive mechanical snarl of its report became seared into the consciousness of every soldier who faced it. It transcended its role as an infantry weapon to become a symbol of an unstoppable, mechanized foe. Historian accounts and veteran testimony agree. The Thompson was an artifact of transition. It was the bridge between the finely machined craftsmanship of pre-war weapons, a heritage reflected in its original brass compensator and flawless finish, and the brutal, mass-produced simplicity required for global conflict. It was the weapon that took the infamous rough-and-tumble image of the gangster's Chicago typewriter and transformed it into the cold, disciplined terror of a marine assault weapon. Its ultimate legacy is not found in grand parades or air superiority battles, but in the dark, humid memories of those who fought on the Pacific Islands. It stands as a powerful testament to the industrial scale of American warfare, and the way that technology, in this case, the simple ability to dump high volumes of heavy lead downrange, can irrevocably alter the geometry of fear on the battlefield. The drum, however briefly used, and the high rate of fire it enabled, delivered a strategic lesson that the Imperial Japanese Army could not ignore. Material superiority is often the ultimate and most unforgiving expression of fighting spirit. The weapon was eventually replaced by more efficient designs, but the core doctrine of the sustained, close-range shock that it pioneered lived on. This concept continues to influence modern infantry tactics, demonstrating its enduring impact on the philosophy of military engagement. The Thompson remains a monument to the technological escalation of World War II, a mechanical snarl that finally silenced the desperate cries of the Banzai charge and helped secure a victory bought at a staggering human and industrial cost. It was the drum and the fire it unleashed that beat the final cadence of many battles, a rhythm of lead that announced, in the most devastating way possible, the end of the line for entrenched resistance. If you found this deep dive into the technology and human drama of the Thompson submachine gun compelling, please subscribe to the channel for more stories from the darkest days of World War II. Don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts on the Thompson's impact in the comments below.